Hey there neighbors, Kevin here with Etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the 7-way installation kit here on our 2018 Toyota Highlander. So our neighbor came to us today in need of a 7-way and a brake controller because he's planning on taking out his family on a camping trip, and his camper is large enough that it has trailer brakes, and he's going to need all of the help that he can get because the Toyota Highlander, while it is pretty capable, isn't really that capable compared to a half-ton truck. So to make sure that he is nice and safe out on the road, we installed the ETBC7 here, which is going to give him the ability to not only send over his light signals, so that way all of the lights on his trailer are functioning properly, but also send over that brake signal so he can activate the brakes on his trailer and stay nice and safe. Now this 7-way kit is for vehicles where there is not a factory hookup, because we are going to be running wires. Everything that you're going to need is pretty much in the kit besides heat shrink butt connectors. I would definitely pick a few of those up. These are going to be the 10 gauge ones, and that is so that our connection points back here, if you pull this harness back, it's going to have all of those connections for your power, your ground, and running your reverse light circuit, as well as for the brake controllers. Aside from that, running the wires can be a little bit tricky to get it all the way up there without going near anything that's going to be generating heat or anything that's going to be moving. So on this one, once you get past the rear axle, you have a bunch of underbelly panels that are just plastic that you can kind of drop down and just push the wire through. So it's not too difficult with this specific vehicle, but in some cases it definitely can be. So once again, if that is the case for you, definitely feel free to use our dealer locator, and you can enter in your zip code to find a shop near you and get it professionally installed. Now, if you are wanting to do this yourself, stick around and I'll walk you through the process. So to start off our install, we need to make sure that we already have a 7-way. Now, ours does not, so we are adding on our kit here. This is the ETBC7, which is going to swap us from that 4-pole wiring harness, which we have hanging out right over here. And that's going to plug right into our ETBC7 so that we can transfer over our light signals. And then we're going to have a couple other functions that we're going to need to run ourselves, which is going to be 12-volt power and ground. We'll also need our brake output for our brake controller, and then we have another wire here that's going to be for our reverse light circuit. Now, in most cases, you're typically not going to use this, and you can just kind of bend it back and then tape it up. Just cap it off and save it, just in case later on maybe you need it. Typically, you're really only using that if you have a boat trailer with surge brakes, so that way you could have a electric lockout, so that way when you're backing up the boat trailer, you can prevent the surge brakes from activating and you can actually back up with it. We want to make sure that we first have 4-pole wiring, which our neighbor has already installed today, and it's just hanging out below. From there, we're also going to need a way to mount it up to our trailer hitch. Now, it does come with a mounting bracket that you can use to drill into your fascia, but in most cases you really don't want to be putting extra holes in there, and most times the plastic really isn't strong enough for you to be putting the plug in and out of it a bunch of different times. You can end up wearing through it and having this kind of fall off of your fascia, and then now you got some ugly holes in it. So I highly recommend picking up a no drill bracket so that you can mount it up to. It's going to come with a hose clamp, and these are going to come in either short or long. I went with the short today just because the long kind of stuck out a little bit too far. It'll look a little goofy, whereas with our short we can have that still stay around the same length out from our vehicle as the trailer hitch. Now, it is going to sit a little bit lower just because there's not really much clearance above for me to put the bracket up there and then have our wiring actually come and sit here just because of the way the cross tube is. Now, there might be some differences you find if you have a different trailer hitch, and you might get a little bit more clearance between the fascia and the hitch and then be able to do so. Just do whatever you feel looks the best and is going to give you the most protection, so that way you can keep the wiring up off the ground. We're going to have 4 screws, Phillips head, and there's going to be a lock washer, a flat washer, and then also a tiny little hex nut that we're going to be putting through here. So we'll put the bolt or screw through first, and then on the other side, that's where we're going to use that flat washer, split lock washer, and nut. We'll get all 4 of these in. That'll help hold up our wiring to our mounting brackets here. Now that we have that mounted up, we can take our 4-pole that's facing towards the 7-way, and that's going to have a little special tab on it that's going to match the cutout in our bracket, so we can just pop that right in. So that way you have a 4-pole and a 7-way that you can use, so that way you're not having to carry an extra adapter just in case you tow multiple trailers. And I have cut off the regular butt connectors that come with our 7-way here, because I'm going to switch over to some heat shrink ones so that way we can be waterproof and not have to worry about anything getting corroded. And like I said, I'm also going to shove that reverse light circuit back in there, and I'll tape a little bit over that as well. Now, we're going to also have some duplex wiring in our kit. So it's going to be a white and a black, and that is going to have a casing that's going to be rated for outdoor use. So I've already ran this all the way from the back of the car here up to the engine compartment, and that's exactly where we're going to be connecting to our circuit breakers and then to the battery. And then we're also going to have a firewall grommet that we're going to pass through to get into the cab, so that way we can get our brake controller output over to our 7-way here. So for our white and our black wires, I'm going to be putting the black to black for the 7-way at the back and our wiring running forward, and then blue to white, because I'm going to run that white wire into our cabin. We can crimp these down. And then we'll come back with our heat gun and shrink the butt connectors as well. Now with our 4-pole wiring that we already had installed, we're going to be connecting that into the other 4-pole connector at the back side of our wiring here. And then I'm going to snip off, actually, yeah, that might be better. Snip off this cap, because we are no longer going to need it. And I'm going to take some zip ties, I'm going to run it between the wiring to help prevent these from being able to back off of each other. And then I usually like to just cap the whole thing off in some electrical tape as well. Now we have our ground that we're going to need to put to some metal here. Now there really isn't much to go to. There's a pinch weld right here for the end of the frame rail, and I think what I'm going to do is go to that, and we can just kind of make sure that our ground's good enough. Sometimes you might find you hit a certain spot and it's not enough, it's not a good enough ground. You may have to extend the wire. In our case, I'm going to try this first, and if I run into any kind of issues at all, I'll know, hey, it's probably the ground. Come back to it and just extend the wire over to the actual frame rail itself and get that tied down. I'm going to be using one of the self-tapping screws in the kit. And I'm also going to take some of that wire loom that's included in our kit. I'm going to wrap that around here, or I may just duct tape it. I'll kind of play around with it a little bit. I really want to just get all of this wiring tucked as high up as I can. Make sure that none of it can get snagged on anything, potentially get tore. Now we can roll through how I ran all the wiring up to the front. Starting out, that pinch weld surface, there's a hole on that. I use that to kind of just help keep my wiring held up at the back here. And it comes straight across. There's some wiring right here at the body mount for the frame. And I zip tied onto that, came up over, and we come a little bit further. You get up towards the gas tank, that's where I start to kind of come back down, because there's a body mount right here. I hid my wiring up along that, and then I stayed with that bracket. So there's another one going over, so I'm just tucked in right along this. You can see part of it's sticking out here by the gas tank, and I just came down to that first piece of plastic underbody here. So I pushed that through until I got to the second half of that. There's a couple of bolts. I popped those out, and then there's a couple of just little plastic retention clips here that you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver to undo. You'll want to keep kind of pressure on it as you're twisting it, because it'll just keep twisting forever if you don't actually apply some pressure to kind of help pull this down. So same with that one and this one. Once I had that down enough, I was able to sneak the wire over some more, and you can see right here. Now, when I was doing this, I was really trying to find a grommet to where I could sneak it into the cabin of the vehicle, but unfortunately there just wasn't a good spot for us to do that. I think probably the only grommet that I could really potentially used would have been way further back. And at that point, we're pulling out a lot of the interior, and it's just not worth it at that point anymore. So I come out of the plastic, I come around this body mount here, and then we shot straight up into the engine compartment. I have a little fish stick that I use quite often to just push the wiring through and be able to pull it back up. So that is exactly what we did over here. Now we're back up at the top of our engine compartment here. You can see the wiring coming up. And like I said, I kept it really tight to the firewall and then just came up and I zip tied it to this hose. We're gonna have to run our circuit breakers, and I think the best place to do it is probably gonna be right here. Now we do need to be careful because the hood latch casing or wiring here is running right through this area too. So I'll probably push up on that when I shoot my screws in on just a little bit below it. And then from there, we do need to also run our wiring into our cab. Now, I've already gone and punctured a hole into one of the grommets in the firewall, and that is right back here. You can see these two hoses. I just went alongside it, and on the inside, you'll see metal hoses. So I have this little tool here that'll allow me to pass wiring through it, and it's got a sharp edge on it, so that way it cuts into those grommets. And then when I push my wiring in, it'll pop out on the other side. Now it's time for the circuit breakers. I've got my power wire over here for my 12-volt power at the 7-way, and we have two circuit breakers. One is going to say 40 amps, one's going to say 30. We also have a 20. The 20 is not going to be needed. The 30 is going to be needed for the brake controller that we're installing today. So that one is going to go for our brake controller output now, or sorry, power to our brake controller. Now the 40 amp one is for the 7-way itself. So what I like to do is I'll put two of them together and use that center mounting hole for both. I've already drilled a little hole here, so it'll make it a little bit easier of a process to get my self-tapper in there. And then now all I got to do is put self-tappers into the sides, and then we can start getting our connections made. Now when it comes to making your connections to your two posts, the copper side is going to be towards our battery. The silver side is going to be going out to whatever we have it running to. So I am going to go to that silver post for my first connection, and that is going to be the 12-volt power at our 7-way. So I'll take one of my smaller ring terminals. Crimp that down. We can pull the nut off of the silver post. Put on our power. I'll wait to snug that fully down. I want to kind of see how the rest of these are going to run. Now we do have that excess wiring that we just snipped off. Pull that back out. We can figure out what we need to reach over to our battery connection. Say about that long. We can take out a little bit of the casing. And one side will get a larger ring terminal, the other will get the smaller. Loosen our nut on our battery here. Up on our wiring. Retighten that down. Now on the circuit breaker side, we're going to be using a 3/8 socket. Be careful, you don't need to go super tight on these, but you do want them nice and snug. We don't want any wiggle out of here. Now using more of that excess that we cut off, I'm going to be running another wire into our grommet that we have in the back there where we had our white wire ran through. This one I'm just going to push through just because it's pretty much easy now that there's a hole set in there. I also kind of need to figure out how I want to shape this around all of our equipment here. But this is going to be for our brake controller. So our brake controller is going to need power as well. That's where we're going to be getting it from this circuit breaker and from the battery. So to make it from that circuit breaker over, I'll probably just follow kind of the same path we already took, so then I can just zip tie all my stuff together and have it all tucked out of the way from anything that's going to be moving. I've got my second wire all set and ready to go to connect to the battery, same way we did with the first one, although with this one I am going to wait just because we don't have all of our stuff hooked up to the brake controller yet. I don't even have the brake controller out of the box yet, so let's get that out. We'll figure out where we want to mount it inside, and we need to find out where the cold side of our brake light switch is going to be. From what I've seen in the past, for this year generation, it's going to be a green wire that we're looking for. So I'm going to go find that, and I will show you exactly where that's located. Down inside of our vehicle, what we're looking for is the brake pedal. When we go to the top of the brake pedal, there's a switch there, and there's a bunch of wires coming out. I've already found the brake light switch wire, which I can show you in just a sec, but I kind of wanted to go over how to get to that and to show you the inside of the grommet. So if you see over on the other side, that is where our wiring is coming through for the signal for our brake light, or sorry, not brake light, for our brake controller, and then also for power for our brake controller. Now, back over to our wiring. This bundle was kind of hard to get into, so they taped it to this one. So I sat in here with my razor blade and slowly just cut the tape. I cut the tape that was over this wire loom, peeled all that back to where I could get to the wires, and it was the thickest green wire out of the bundle. Let me turn the car on and we can show you that that is the brake light switch. All right, now you'll see my test light should come on anytime that the brake pedal is being depressed. Second we let go, it turns off. And it tells us it's only getting power when the brake pedal is being depressed, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now in our kit, we're gonna have some quick splices. I'm gonna use that for my connection to the cold side of the brake light switch. So on our wire harness, it's gonna have 4 wires, power, ground, brake output, and then brake light switch. And that's gonna be our red. I'm gonna slide this into the side that has a closed end, and then the side where it's got an opening for us to slip the wire in is going to be that green wire. And then this little metal piece right here is going to bite into the wire casing and make a connection with the wire that's inside of it, so that way we have that signal coming across. So I'm going to get in there and do this. It's unfortunately going to just be too tight for us to both be in there at the same time. For our button, I'm going to be using one of these 3 blanks here. Now I've looked behind there, and it looks like even though this is a blank, there's a wire harness running into it, so I don't want to use that one. This one is open, and so is this one as well, but there's a little bit more stuff behind this one, so I'm going to go with this guy right here, so that way I know I don't have to worry about anything behind it potentially blocking me from being able to install my button. Now I'm just going to use a little plastic trim panel tool here just to pop that out. You can see it's just held in with some clips. We'll have our blank. This is going to be the replacement for it. We'll pop in our switch from the back side just because it's not going to really fit right now. Right now it's blocked by the plastic that we have in our dash, so I'll come up from the back side, pop that in. But for this, we can just pop that right into place. I'm going to get under the dash, and I'm going to get this in, and I'm also going to get my cable put in. Now, there's a 90-degree bend in one side and a straight on the other, so you can kind of choose whatever fits best for where you're mounting the plug. In our case, that's going to be the straight, so I'm going to get under there. I'm going to push this in from the back, and then on the front side here, we're going to have this little collar that's got a nut on the front of it, so that way we can tighten it down. And that'll thread into our button here. You can see all the little threads on it, so I'm going to get that put in, and then we can put on our little control knob. So this turned all the way to one side, so if you have it turned all the way counterclockwise, it should be at 0. If you turn it clockwise, it should run all the way up to 10. being our full brake output. So there is a stud right behind the parking brake, and that's just above our carpet line here. There's a brace running over it too, so we're just popping the nut off. Gonna put our ring terminal on for our ground, and then we'll reinstall that nut, and then we should have a nice ground for our brake controller. I've trimmed back the white wire here. I'm going to be using that for my brake output towards my 7-way, so that's going to go to the blue wire from our wire harness. For our black wire, we're going to be putting that to the black wire on our brake controller. And that's going to be providing power to the brake controller so that it can operate. Now we need to get our main unit mounted up in place, and then we can plug in our connector and tie up all of our wiring here with some zip ties. You remember from before, we had our circuit breakers. We have a 40 amp one for our 7-way that we installed, and then we have a 30 amp one for our brake controller. We've got the power wire that ran through the firewall over to our main unit, and over on the other side here with the copper post, that needs to run down to our battery. So I have it all ready to go. It's just a little strip of the wiring, the extra that you have left over. I snipped it off, use that as a jumper to run from our circuit breaker over to our battery, and I'm going to use a 12mm socket to get the nut loose here. Pop that off. We can put on our new one for the brake controller. Tighten that down. I'm going to try to push this over just a bit so we can still have that cap cover it too. Now that we're hooked up to our trailer, we're getting a flashing blue and green light, and what that means is that we're in calibration mode. So our main unit, that red control module that we zip tied up under the dash, is going to need to figure out what its orientation is, because it has an internal inertia sensor, so that way it can provide proportional braking power to how we press down on the pedal. So if we are pressing down super hard, it's going to want to give us that same proportional braking power to our trailer brakes. Now, when it's maybe a lighter touch and we don't really need all that braking power, it's going to sense that it's a slower deceleration, and then it's going to provide that same equal proportional style braking back to the brakes on the trailer. So to actually calibrate this, all you have to do is drive around, just hit the brakes. Typically, only takes maybe a couple of minutes to do. To be honest with you, I've had most of these calibrate before I can even get over to the other side of our lot where we usually do our test driving and braking. So what we're looking for is just that light going to a solid blue, and then once we press on the brakes or we press on the button here for the manual override, you'll see that switch over to a red. So with all that being said, we're going to hop in and we're going to take this out on a test drive and get our brake controller calibrated. This one's solid blue. We hit it 4 or 5 times. Just stopping through the parking lot. I didn't even make a full circle around just this side of the lot, so we're already ready to go. You can see it's solid blue. So that is all calibrated. We are all ready to tow our trailer and have our brakes activate. That's going to do it for our look at and installation of the 7-way installation kit here on our 2018 Toyota Highlander. My name's Kevin, and if you still have some questions about what's going to be the right wiring setup for your vehicle and trailer, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department. We'd be happy to help you out on your journey.